Good day, everybody. Zack here with RevZilla, and welcome to the 100th episode of Daily Rider. We wanted to do something special to mark the occasion, as you might expect, so please help me welcome our very, very special guest. This is a 1924 Harley-Davidson Model J. It has a 1,000cc air-cooled pocket valve V-twin. It was rated for about 9 horsepower, and when it sold new 100 years ago, it was on showroom floors for about $350. This bike here is worth more like $25,000 or $30,000, and I think it's pretty safe to say that's not the only thing that's changed in the past 100 years. I really wanted to mark 100 episodes of Daily Rider with something special, and I couldn't be more excited to be riding a 100-year-old bike. So, on the ride to work today, we're going to the office, and also, we're going back in time. Ready, everybody? Here we go! All right, everybody, before we get going with this daily ride, a quick reminder that this episode and many others on the channel are brought to you by RevZilla, the YouTube channel that you are watching. If you would like to buy a 100-year-old motorcycle, RevZilla can't really help you there. But if you want to buy oil or a cover for your 100-year-old motorcycle, or boots, gloves, a helmet, a jacket for yourself, you can find those things at RevZilla. And when you spend your money at RevZilla, some of it goes into producing content like this. So we hope you enjoy, and thanks for watching. Okie dokie, everybody. 1924 Harley-Davidson Model J. Where to start? Well, we'll start with the engine, I suppose. The engine is a 61 cubic inch V-twin, 60.34 cubic inches, I believe, is what I saw on the internet, but it's affectionately referred to as the 61. It's a little under 1,000 cc's. Very classic Harley engine design. Air-cooled, 45 degrees, and it is a pocket valve engine, which means instead of valves being over the cylinder head as they are on all modern motorcycles, or even typical old side valve engines, kind of like a Briggs & Stratton kind of thing, the exhaust valve is a side valve here, but the intake valve goes above it. So they sort of face each other on the side of the cylinder there. Very interesting. I'm not going to try and give you a whole history lesson on this bike, because first of all, I don't know enough about it to pretend to be a professor, and also I got to get on this thing and ride. But it is a fascinating piece of equipment. It's so kind of bare and raw. And when we start it up, you'll be able to see these little push rods move in and letting air in and out of those big old combustion chambers. A couple things to call out on this bike that are not sort of standard, if you will. It's largely stock. The front wheel has a front brake, which these bikes did not have way back when. A lot of bikes have front brakes just for safety to be ridden on modern roads. So it's a 1960s or something Japanese front wheel that was put on here in retrofit so that there's a little bit of extra safety. Speaking of brakes, the owner of the motorcycle informed me that you can tell this is an export model. In other words, this bike was originally produced to go overseas because it technically has 2 rear brakes. It has a drum back here, and if you push on this pedal here, it pinches the outside of the drum with this little shoe, very rudimentary. And if you push on this heel brake, it pushes on the inside of the drum. Kind of interesting little tidbit factoid about the bike. It has 2 rear brakes and originally 0 front brakes. As for rear suspension, it is rudimentary, which is to say there is none. As you can see, this is just a straight steel trellis back here. The rear suspension's right here in the seat. There's a little spring in there, so that'll be the rear suspension. The seat is original. You can see it's got a little bit of adjustability for up and down in case your buns needed a little bit of different angle, which is kind of a fun feature you don't see on a lot of modern bikes. Another thing that's a little bit less standard is the fire extinguisher back here. Hopefully we won't need that, but good to have it just in case. Oh, also, it's got kind of a cool, I think this is an original feature. I was told it's called a town and country exhaust. So there was a flap that covered up this hole right here, and then the muffler would be sort of extended and be quieter for around town. And then when you're out in the country, you could hinge this up and expose this little extra hole here, and the pipe would flow more freely, and the bike would make a little bit more power. Obviously, that little flap has left us years ago, maybe decades ago. So it's just a country exhaust, no town about it. But, you know, hopefully we won't make too much noise. I don't think we're going to make more noise than a lot of modern Harleys, to be honest. Let's see what else. Holy smokes, there's so much more to talk about. The transmission, very interestingly, it does not have a clutch lever. Why doesn't it have a clutch lever? That's because it has a foot clutch. So you got to push here. This is pulling the clutch lever in, and this is letting it out. So that's what I'm going to have to do. And I'm going to have to shift through the 3-speed transmission with my hand. Foot clutch, hand shift. Pretty standard back in the day, but it's a little different than the bikes we normally cover here on Daily Rider. And yeah, cockpit, pretty sparse. We got an ignition switch, and these are for the lights, which I don't think we will need, hopefully, unless it takes us a very long time to get to work. Okay, I've ridden this thing a couple times. I'm still kind of a newbie, so wish me luck as we take off on this 100-year-old Harley-Davidson. Last thing I'll say before we take off here is if you'd like to know more about this bike, see more pictures, learn more about it, I have written an article. That link is in the description of this video. Please check it out. If you have a moment, I probably worked very hard on it. Now the time has come to start up the bike, but instead of just flipping a key and hitting a button, it's going to be a little bit more involved this time. Bear with me. Fuel on, which it's already on, and then we got to go over to the carburetor, and we're going to go to warm up. Is it warm still? Probably not. Let's prime it. You go to prime, you can see it like pulls a little needle out when you go to prime. Then we're going to, this is spark advance. We're going to retard ignition fully. We're going to leave the ignition off. We're going to go wide open on the throttle, and we're going to do 2 prime kicks, and then we're going to shut the throttle, and then we're going to go ignition on, and we're going to go to warm up on the choke, and then we're going to put our foot through it. Wish me luck, everybody. There we go. Ha ha ha! Nice. Look at that. Idles and everything. Look at the little valves going. Isn't that great? It is way too cool. Okay. 100-year-old bike for our 100th ride. What do you say, everybody? Are we ready? Oh, there's one more thing. I think it's probably warm enough to go from the warm-up setting on the choke to open. Petcock on. Oh, and when it starts, you're supposed to advance the ignition. Whoops, I forgot to do that. Okay, ignition all the way advanced. Ready to go. All right. So, my left foot's going to live here for the next spell of time. Okay, clutch in. First gear. Off we go, everybody. Rear brake. I'm going to do my best to do no front brake because that's how they did it back in the day, but I like to have it as a safety measure, I'll be honest. We're off. Yeah. We go into neutral, rear brake. Not feeling super confident about splitting lanes yet anyway. We're going to take it easy for now. And you always want to lean to the right, I'm told, because your foot controls the clutch. You don't want your foot to slip off the clutch, so always lean to the right as a habit. All right, let's talk about specs, shall we? I don't know. It's pretty hard to find specs on a 100-year-old bike, okay? I don't really know what the seat height is, or how much gas it holds, or how much horsepower it makes. I did mention that, actually. 9 horsepower is the rating, I believe. I don't know how much it weighs yet. A little under 400 pounds is what I'm told, but when I get to the office, I'm going to weigh it. So that information will be in the description of this video and in my article. But yeah, not exactly a spec show this time around. Really more about the experience, which I'm loving so far, I gotta say. Though it is stressful compared to riding a normal motorcycle. Here we go. Oop. Here we go. First gear is tall. It's a torquey motor. I'm gonna have to merge now. Signals were not really a thing back then. I'm gonna signal with my hand. and then we're gonna go for third. I've never done this before. Top gear, everybody. Wow, nice wide gear spacing. I love that. You know how I'm always complaining about gearboxes that are ratios are too close? No such troubles on the Model J, everybody. Slow down for this curve. There you go. Not being disciplined enough with my clutch foot. I was told you have to be very disciplined with your clutch foot, and I'm not doing it. Here's a little bit of a bump. I wonder if that's going to feel like, oh my gosh. Okay, we're going to go down. Oop, was not gentle enough with that shift. Really lets you know when you're not doing things right, which I kind of appreciate. Okie doke, I suppose we could talk about ergonomics here. They're very strange. Feet out in front of you. Sort of feel like you're sitting at a desk. Ooh, do I need to go down? No, okay. We're good, we're good, we're good. Wow, there's a lot of merging happening, and I gotta shift with my hand. I'm gonna go down to first gear. Thank you, good sir. All right, back to second. So where was I? Right, feels like you're sitting at a desk and the handlebar is crazy swooped back, right? It feels like a tiller on a boat. And you have to remember to lean back, because if you want to take a tight turn, it comes in towards your stomach. The ergonomics are very strange, but not altogether uncomfortable, I have to say. Usually on a motorcycle, you're one of the more agile vehicles on the road, but on the old Model J, maybe not so much. And you know what? Going slow in the right lane is just fine for me. I don't need to impress anybody with how fast I'm gonna go. I just want to be safe and out of everyone's way. We're speeding up a little bit. I'm gonna go for top gear. Whoa. I wonder if that's like a wheel balance thing or something. There's a little shimmy shake when you get going faster. Nothing will shake your confidence, people, like riding a 100-year-old bike. If you think you're a good rider, you're not. I'm upshifting again. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go for a pass on the freeway. I'm going for it. Merging out into the middle lane. Wish me luck. I mean, it's pretty impressive that a bike from 1924 can even go on a road like this and sort of keep up with traffic. Granted, truck traffic, but still, like, they didn't have roads like this in 1924. This wasn't a thing. It was unheard of to have super slab. And it's pretty rad that a bike like this can even hold its own or hold a candle to modern traffic. I think that says a lot about this engine and, you know, the platform that ultimately did a lot to slingshot Harley-Davidson from a brand into Americana and into military service for World War I and all that jazz that happened that pushed the Model J into the history books. You kind of understand why when you're in a situation like this, totally out of its element, and yet look at it go, just chugging along. This is awesome. I mean, it's not majestic, but it's close. It's very impressive. One thing I could talk about in this situation as we're cruising along at pretty consistent speed here in top gear is that I was told by the owner that you should burp these bikes about every minute or something like that when you're riding, because the oil pumps do not do a great job lubricating the top end of the engine. The oiling system is very rudimentary. It's basically total loss. It drips oil down into the engine and then it burns off and you get more. It doesn't recycle it particularly well, and it doesn't do a great job pumping oil to certain parts of the engine. So when you're going along like this, every minute or so, close the throttle, burp some oil, suck some oil up into the top end with the vacuum of the engine internals, and then you're back on the throttle again, cruising along. Just look down and see those little push rods flailing around, popping the valves open. It's so cool. The instrumentation in the cockpit is sparse, to say the least. I don't have a speedometer or a tachometer or a clock or a trip meter or anything really. I never thought we'd be going too slow for a 1924 motorcycle, but starting to question it. Let's go for it, everybody. We're gonna go for a pass. Pulling up the hill, second gear. Into top gear. Back into the right lane. So yeah, even though these bikes in this era weren't designed to do this kind of thing, they can, as I've mentioned a couple times, which is pretty impressive. And the impetus for modern day cannonball rallies where these things are ridden across countries. It's pretty cool. Certainly a lot more maintenance involved than with a modern motorcycle, but that was the way of the gun, you know. I think I lost my mirror. That's actually when we talk about mirrors. The mirror on this bike is, well, I think it's aftermarket, let's put it that way. It's one of the worst mirrors I've ever used, but fortunately I'm too distracted with everything else to worry about that. Like slowing down. Slowing down, even though there's a green light, I'm slowing down because I'm not sure, I'm very unsure. Did a bad job with the rev match. All right, we're off the freeway and into the neighborhood section of the Daily Rider route, where we test low-speed manners and we try to do footless stops. And I'm just going to warn you right now, I don't think I'm going to get a lot of footless stops out of this sucker, but we shall see. Here we go, here we go. Nope, not a stop. Oh, I almost stalled it. Oh geez, and there's a trash truck now. Still not very good at the shifting. I can tell the transmission's not very happy with what I'm doing, but I don't exactly know what to do differently. Clutch in, we're gonna go neutral. Oh, that was almost it. I didn't put my foot down. Did I come to a stop? Let's see the instant replay. So as for normal round town manners, there's no throttle spring, so the throttle sticks whatever position you put it in. That makes the throttle response a little bit strange, and it's very loose. Not a lot of fine motor control in the throttle. You just sort of like suggest an RPM and then give the engine a second to catch up and figure out what it wants to do, what kind of mood it's in. The steering is very stable and deliberate, and the bike is incredibly narrow. The seat's not very high, so in some ways it's not bad around town, but in most ways it's well, you know, it's kind of intimidating. Whew. Looks like all's well down there. It's puffing a little bit of smoke, but I'm told it's supposed to do that because it's supposed to burn the oil off, remember? It doesn't actually recycle oil, it just dribbles it in there and burns it off. Every stoplight is a little bit intimidating. Also on a hill, so you need to use the rear brake to hold the hill, but you got to use your left foot to get the bike in gear and then hold it with your right foot on the ground, and we're off. You know, it's rated for about 8 horsepower, 8 or 9. It sort of feels like more than that, and I think that's probably just because it's got a lot of torque, right? I mean, horsepower is about RPM, and you don't get a lot of revs with this bike, but you do have a lot of grunt. All right, here we are into Lover's Lane. Passenger accommodation discussion is going to be pretty short. There are no passenger accommodations to speak of, though in 1924, or, you know, late 20s or whatever, I feel pretty confident that you could stick a friend or a lover, perhaps, on that back rack there, have him sit side saddle with no helmet, probably holding the dozen eggs. I think it was more of a time of utility than regulation. And obviously, motorcycles were still kind of a lone wolf thing to do, you know? Touring, travel, multiple people, that hadn't quite hit yet, aside from sidecars and the like, or military operations. Being on a hill is really tricky, truly. Okie dokie, here we go into the twisty road section of the Daily Rider route. How's the suspension? How's the handling? You know, some ways better than you might think. The sprung saddle does not have any damping, so you just get bounced around a lot. I'm not sure if you can see how much I'm moving around. It's sort of like being on a carnival ride. The front suspension is either non-existent or harsh. I guess, yeah, there's technically something up there. It is very rudimentary. It sort of almost forces you to relax from a riding position standpoint, because you're sitting so far away from the fork and the front end, you're never going to move forward into attack position. It's a very relaxed vibe that you get, and I kind of appreciate that, because as though you needed another one, it's a reminder to take it slow. Take it 1924 slow. It is quite stable and predictable, I'll say that. You know, once you get used to the strange riding position and the no suspension and that kind of thing, I mean, it is not twitchy, I'll tell you that much. There's so much leverage that you have on the fork that turning is nice and easy, but like taking your hands off the bars, there's not a whiff of instability or tank slap or anything like that. It is supremely stable, which again, I think kind of just speaks to what was paramount in that day. Having to be smooth and reliable and pretty fast and stable. That was what it was about. And I gotta say, this bike's pretty good at all those things, considering. Something about drifting through a long corner on a modern road on a bike that's 100 years old is just strange. It's surreal. It's really cool. The massive leverage that you have on the handlebar to steer is also massive leverage to whatever action happens in the front suspension gets kind of like amplified through this long handlebar. It jostles your arms. A little better with the downshift, a little better. Make it neutral so that I can't screw this up. Okay, off the twisty road section. 390 Duke. That's a Daily Rider alum. Oop. Back onto surface streets on the Model J. Off we go. Nice. All right, as we approach this red light, we could talk about brakes. I'm not going to slam on the brakes because I don't think that's necessary. I'll just tell you that the brakes are, you know, I would say, oop, come on, Zach, adequate. They are worse than the horsepower, that's for sure. You know, it's not a fast motorcycle, but it does, you know, as we're seeing here, and as I found out, it's keeping up with traffic and, you know, surface streets and whatnot. It's like surprisingly adept. The brakes, you could get into a lot of trouble with the brakes. The brakes are maybe the most emblematic piece of engineering as far as describing the time in which the bike existed. It wasn't a priority, I guess. To a stop here, neutral. As long as you prepare yourself, though, it'll stop. I gotta say, I'm tempted to split lanes. It's so narrow, but I'm just like too nervous about my ability to you know, shoot away from the light. Sometimes we talk about the dash and the instrumentation this part of the ride. Obviously not a lot to that. Here's the light switch here, and the ignition, and no instrumentation. It does have 2 gas tanks, I believe, or a split tank anyway, I think. And oops, time to go already. Oh, come on, Zach, focus. Left foot, clutch, first gear. Better modulation with the clutch, Zach. Slow shift. And just to finish up that conversation, it does have an oil tank up here. This is where the oil, sort of oil reservoir is, and where it drips and releases into the engine. At this point in the ride, I sometimes talk about whether or not you'd buy this bike just for the engine. You know, is the engine really worth it? Well, this bike's a totally different scenario, isn't it? I mean, you'd buy this bike just to have this bike. But not knowing a lot about bikes of this vintage, to be honest, compared to people who actually know, I would say that the engine does seem like the thing that is most special about the bike, and it's sort of what defined it and what catapulted it into popularity and so on. It's alive with a lot of feelings, and most of the feelings are mixed. but the engine is downright cool. I mean, downright cool. Agricultural, slow, weird, old, stinky, yeah, but it's really cool. Aha, I think that was the first shift I did without looking down. I'm an old hand, I tell you. That's actually probably a good segue to tip my cap to people who actually own, work on, use, restore, buy, sell, and love motorcycles like this. I've got a lot of respect for what you do. I hope I'm not doing anything really egregious or silly riding this bike. I'm obviously just trying to experience it and do my best not to damage it. I gotta say, I'm having a great time. So it's at this point in the ride where I circle back to questions I've asked, or, you know, broad, sweeping annotations about where the bike fits into motorcycling. And hopefully in the case of the Model J, it's pretty darn clear where it fits in. It's a narrow, clattery, loud, and incredibly important slice of motorcycling history, American history, industrial history. I have to say, the thing that I've taken away from it most of all, maybe, is just the relationship to modern Harley-Davidson. And I know that's exactly what the museum plaque would say. It's what Harley would want me to say about the bike. But when I get on the throttle in second gear there, and I open it up, and it goes bap, 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 and I put in the clutch and shift it to the next gear, it kind of reminds me of air-cooled Sportsters that died off not that long ago. It is a very familiar and familial sound. You can make all the jokes you want about how the reason that it feels like a modern Harley is that modern Harleys are old and heavy too, or the design is. But that's not what I mean, obviously. I mean the actual sound, the actual pistons going up and down in there. It's something that'll be familiar to anyone who's ridden practically any Harley-Davidson from the last 100 years, and that's pretty darn cool. I really like that. And it's honestly another really clear example of how Harley-Davidson was so successful in the heyday of the 20th century. They built stuff like this. It's a pretty remarkable machine, considering when it's from, in my opinion. And speaking of when it's from, there weren't a lot of paved roads back in 1924, and we're about to go down a dirt road. Hopefully the bike will feel at home. So here we go, down what is presumably a more familiar route for a 1924 motorcycle. No traction control to turn off. No nothing to do except ride. Here we go. It feels almost more appropriate. Like, it sort of feels about as bumpy as it does on a paved road. This is probably more like the terrain that a bike like this had to deal with on a daily basis 100 years ago. And it feels pretty good. Oh man, I could do 10 miles of that. You know, I'm being polite to the bike, granted, but still, that's pretty cool. All right, well, we've reached the part of the ride where I usually try to do a wheelie on a bike. So here we go. Full throttle. I pulled on the bars, and no, it's not. No, I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna try to wheelie. I told the owner that sometimes I do wheelies on bikes. In fact, I turned it off instead of putting it in neutral. Jesus, Zach, stay focused. I told the owner that I usually try and do a wheelie for every daily ride, and he said, good luck. Not the Model J strong suit. I don't think wheelies. I don't think it was as big a part of, you know, motorcycling culture. Let's just put it that way. So no wheelie today. All right, one last little sprint here. Let's go, buddy. All right, well, can you slide the back end around as you come into a corner? I mean, that'd be the only thing you could do. But I don't think I'm really going to experiment with that too much. Oh, they got a little slide there. You probably couldn't see it, but it did it. Sliding this thing around is really not the top of my priority list, I gotta say. I'm just happy to have made it along the whole daily rider route and to the office. Is way too cool, man. 100-year-old bike got us to the office. Oh man, I feel thankful for the opportunity and thankful to have survived. What do you think? Should we do a U-turn test? I mean, there's all these cars here, so I don't have a lot of opportunity, but we'll give it a try anyway. Left-hand U-turns are honestly a little bit scarier because clutch, my left foot clutch, so I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna go feet up. Oh god, oh god, oh god. I mean, I don't know, what was that, 3.5 parking space? It's a long motorcycle, and I'm not great with the foot clutch, so, you know, it's a little more stressful than usual, maybe. But here we go, everybody. We're pulling into the spot. Throw it in neutral quick before okay, we did it. We made it. I'm gonna pop it up on the rear stand here because I think it's so cool. Little rudimentary center stand. There it is. 1924 Model J, everybody. Let's take one more listen to it, shall we? Puffing smoke, leaking oil. Go to sleep, little valve train. Smoking like a pipe. Holy cow, you guys. That was so flippin' cool. It's just a really, really cool thing to experience a bike from 1924 from 100 years ago and think about what it meant to ride a motorcycle then, what the environment was like, what the other motorcycles were like, how much innovation was happening, how much turmoil there was being post-war and pre-war. I mean, it's really something. If you want to be really cynical, you could say that Harley-Davidson's success came from other places, didn't come from ingenuity, engineering, perseverance, anything like that. But I think that's too cynical for me. I prefer to look at the sort of rosy side of the history that has become and the history that's come after this motorcycle and really appreciate what this bike means. And in many ways, this bike has stood in the reflection of the mirror of many designers at Harley-Davidson over the past 100 years. It must have, you know, when you're trying to innovate and move forward. There's lots of sort of technological things and cultural things, and it's absolutely fascinating to see it this close and also to hear it and smell it and feel it. It's a very, very cool experience. I don't have any Instagram questions from you all because this is a surprise episode. I didn't post about it on social media beforehand. I hope you'll forgive me. Again, I would point you to the article that I've written. The link is in the description of this video. I hope you got a kick out of the 100-year-old bike. If you've been around since the beginning of Daily Rider, thank you so very, very much for all of your support and watching the show and getting a kick out of it and taking all these rides with me. I still appreciate every view and every click. So thank you very much for making the Daily Rider ecosystem a place where people can have fun and learn. So let's put this sucker on the Daily Rider leaderboard, shall we? See where it stacks up to the rest of motorcycling. All right, everybody. Here we are inside RevZilla West at the Daily Rider leaderboard, and we have a 1924 Harley-Davidson Model J ready to go on the board. What a ride. That was fun. It was a lot of fun. I think I made it the whole time without touching the front brake, by the way. Proud of myself for that. I'll give myself a little pat on the back. Glad to have it there for a safety feature, but I really wanted to experience what it was like to ride a bike in 1924. And granted, I rode it around urban and suburban Los Angeles, so I phoned it in from that perspective. But yeah, it was such a cool experience. To talk about where it goes on the board, it's kind of interesting to see it next to all these bikes here that we usually stack up. Again, you know, all the bikes I've ridden in 2024, probably near the bottom here. Not a very convenient, good daily rider. Suspension performance, engine performance, instrumentation, pretty primitive all around, I say. Where does it stack up on the classics board, do we think? I mean, 1974 Honda XL 250. That was the resto mod there he did. Gixxer 1000, Gixxer Dave, right here. Kind of a crappy motorcycle overall, but better than a Model J, if we're being honest. DT1, same. Honda Trail 90 from 1975. Probably makes less horsepower than the Model J. Pretty comfortable bike though. Pretty convenient, pretty reliable. Not that this bike wasn't, but if you're gonna ride to work, it's pretty hard to argue against a Trail 90, right? Pretty hard to argue for the bike with the foot clutch and 2 rear brakes and that, you know, burns oil and so on and so forth. So here we go. It's a shootout for DFL, everybody. The Honda Winnebago, Aries Honda Gold Wing motorhome camper van contraption abomination. Is the Honda Winnebago better as a daily rider than the Harley-Davidson Model J from 1924? Whew, that's a tough one. They're both unwieldy, difficult to ride, nerve-wracking. The Honda does have, you know, nice smooth power, good horsepower, probably higher top speed, and has a, you know, blinkers and a tape deck that I think worked, maybe not. Anyway, certainly different from a luxury standpoint. The Winnebago also has a place to sleep when you stop. Not a huge consideration in daily rider terms, I'll give you that, but it is a feature that it had. Okay, get to the point, Zach. When it comes down to it, the Honda Winnebago was truly one of the more frightening motorcycling experiences that I've had, and did not have a lot of redeeming features aside from a place to sleep and stuff like that. Whereas the Harley-Davidson Model J took a lot of concentration and was tricky to use, and you make a lot of compromises with it, I'll give you that. But I think less frightening, more enjoyable as a daily rider than that Winnebago, which was truly terrible. And I'm gonna give the nod to the Trail 90 just because how can you not? I mean, come on. Would I rather ride my commute every day on the Model J? Yeah, probably. It's so fun. I just love the hand shifting, and I wanted a 100-year-old bike for the 100th episode of Daily Rider as a kind of a gimmick, right? Sure, fine. But I was so curious about that snapshot of a different time and what it was like to ride. And as someone who has, I hope, a lot of mechanical sympathy and interest and enthusiasm, it was such a visceral, cool experience to ride that bike and to shift with your hand and to see the rocker arms clattering along. And I just loved all that stuff so much. And so to do that on a daily basis would be fun. Maintaining it, might lend a little bit of help with that, ultimately. But anyway, very cool experience. I hope you got a kick out of it. One more friendly reminder about the article that I have written. It'll go live a couple days after this video. So if you're watching this video right now on debut day or opening weekend, as we call it around here, the article might not be quite ready, but check the description of the video for a link or more information on the article. There's a bunch of beautiful photos, and I did my best with the research and the words. So please check it out if you so choose. Thank you for following along for however many of the 100 episodes we've had thus far. Again, I really appreciate it, and I hope you got a kick out of riding that 100-year-old bike. For me, it was a really surreal, cool, dream come true kind of experience. Stoked that I could share it with you all. In the meantime, ride safe and keep your foot on that clutch. It smells like fried food and bad decisions. Oh, cruise ship. That makes sense.